Greetings and welcome to the 31st Historic Calgary Week. My name is Kathleen Rogers and I would like to thank you all for signing in tonight to our talk, Hands-on Heritage, How to Look After Your Heritage Home. And now I have the pleasure of welcoming tonight's speaker. Dave Chalmers is an advocate and owner of a small construction firm dedicated to conserving our built heritage. Dave's company has completed numerous restoration projects over the last 6 years, including Calgary's Old City Hall, the McDougall Church, and the Hunt House at Fort Calgary. As a born and raised Calgarian, he is devoted to understanding the city's history, its built and cultural heritage, and where we go from here. And of course, on a personal note, I'm thrilled to see the successful business Dave has made. I've followed his career for many, many years. So with all that, Dave, it's all yours now, and we look forward to hearing your talk.
Thanks, Kathleen. Not super technical savvy, so we're going to try and do a screen share here. Looks good. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Again, thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for that. That was lovely, and a big thanks to Calgary Public Library for hosting this tonight, and to the Chinook County Historical Society as well. And a big thanks to all the advocates and volunteers out there. Those who are working hard to protect our built heritage. We certainly appreciate it, and it wouldn't happen without you. Awesome, it's working. Okay, so you've bought a home, or you're managing a home, you're looking after a home, you're living in a heritage home. So what's so special about a heritage home? Is it its history? Was there someone important who lived there? Was it an important part of the landscape? Is it its design, or how it impacts the surrounding neighborhood? Or is it the fact that it's been there for more than 100 years? And that's what I like to focus on. I think that's the most important part, is also the longevity of these buildings. Our built heritage is, of course, important. Within its fabric is our history and stories and many lessons. I think when we look to our built heritage, it shows us where we've come from, and maybe the direction that we're heading, and where we're going to go from here. The big question is, why has it lasted that long? Where do we get that 100 years from, or that 100+ years from, out of these buildings? What do you buy nowadays that has a 100-year lifespan? Were the things really that good back then, and that much better than today? And what drove the change to get us to where we are today? I always find that industry seems to drive change. There's always a new material or a new product that comes out that we all kind of clamor towards. But if we look to our past, there's certainly a lot of lessons there. So with a little bit of critical thought and carefully examining sort of where we came from, we can certainly learn a lot of lessons. And then lastly, this is something we don't hear a whole lot about in heritage, is what does sustainability mean in heritage? I know that we've always had the reputation of leaky old buildings that use lots of energy, and they're not very efficient. But there's certainly something to be said about how they were built and how long they've lasted for. And then the next question is, where does the building go when it dies? If we don't look after it and the building dies, what do we do with it? Turn on my laser pointer. So we'll start down here. I think just to build on Hamza's land acknowledgement, I think we should recognize that the first heritage building in Canada, and the first green building really, is the teepee. These are wonderfully efficient buildings. We were in one a couple of weeks ago, and it was 32 degrees outside, and it was lovely and cool and well ventilated. And when you're done with it, it'll decompose. It'll go back into the earth, and it's mobile. It allows a great interaction with the outdoors. So I think there's a lot of lessons, not only from our built heritage, but from also a lot of the First Nations people that we still have to learn. If we fast forward a little bit, when the settlers first arrived, we had these sort of early vernacular buildings, these log buildings. And again, they were pretty rudimentary. They weren't all that pleasant to live in. But there's a lot of lessons there as well. Those were built from local materials, natural materials. We would have thatch roofs. We would have log walls and clay and mud and straw for the infill in between the logs. Windows were quite scarce. Windows would probably have come up from Montana, from Fort Benton on the wagon trail. So if you're lucky enough to have windows, you were doing very well. And then this one's kind of interesting. If we fast forward to today, we've got this person here in this suit. Spraying this chemical in the walls, all in the interest of trying to make the building very efficient. But is that really the best treatment for the building? Is that really what we want to be doing to our buildings? Is that something we can maintain? Is that something we can keep in perpetuity? Because I know that I sure wouldn't want to have that guy in my house spraying whatever he's spraying. So why are we here? What do we want to talk about? The first thing we always refer to in heritage buildings is the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada. That's a document put out by Parks Canada. It's a very high level. It's a very high level document that helps us guide our sort of decision making. We want to talk about the different types of buildings. Every building is unique. They all have different envelopes. And when I say the envelope, we're talking about the roof and the exterior of the building, what keeps the elements out. Don't really touch on interiors because there's not a whole lot of intact interiors left. Hopefully we'll jump into some methods and materials. And once we've done all we can do in our house and we understand what we need to do, is the next thing perhaps might be to get professional advice or to hire a contractor. And then lastly, our system of working on a heritage building, which is always to understand first, put a plan together, and then intervene. So the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. It's not a very technical document. It's more of a decision-making document, but there's some great info in there and some case studies. It'll go through the differences between preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration, and the different standards that apply to each of those. It's a big document. It's a good read, but there's also sort of a great synopsis that you can jump into to get sort of a high-level understanding of it. So types of buildings. What types of buildings do we have? We have load-bearing masonry or mass masonry, and that's where we have, as it sounds, there's a mass masonry structure that holds the building up, whether that be multiple rows of or widths of brick, or sandstone or terracotta or whatever that might be. We have post and beam concrete. That's typically reserved for sort of big commercial buildings downtown, so we'll skip past that one. We've got our lovely early vernacular buildings. So that would be our mud and clay houses, like you see down here, the Hunt House, which is that's the oldest building in Calgary in its original foundation, and it's just a little 14 by 14 log building. And then, of course, what we're most familiar with, I think, in Alberta is wood frame buildings. So that's stick built with lumber walls and then some kind of a sheathing, and then we would have our building envelope, which would be a brick veneer or a wood siding or a stucco. So the first thing that we need to remember, the most important thing on any heritage building, because we see this all the time, is we need to manage the water in our building. The water is the single most destructive element, and we've seen clients that are experiencing hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage just from really poor water management. And this is a great sort of something you can do yourself, and it's something you can maintain throughout the years. This is a beautiful little property in Edmonton, and if you look up top here, we're seeing some growth in there. They've got a small garden growing out of the eaves trough, and there's some damage to the soffit behind. So something's not working there. That's something we want to address. Maybe it's as simple as cleaning out the eaves troughs. And you come down to the bottom here, and you'll see that all that water from that roof is draining down right next to the foundation. And you're starting to see a little bit of mortar missing in the brick. So it's important to get those downspouts away. It sounds simple, but every year we run over them with our lawnmowers and the kids step on them. It's really, really important just to keep pushing that water away from the building. This one's is interesting because there's also some black soils here. There's a garden they put right next to the building, which is very attractive. But that black soil tends to retain a lot of moisture, and it holds the moisture up against the building. But in the wintertime, with our crazy environment of freeze-thaw cycles, you start getting a lot of damage to the structure. And if you look up a little bit higher here, you'll see there's kind of this white patch with the efflorescence, the salt coming up, which is a sort of an early indicator of damage is happening. And this could easily be resolved just by quick cleaning, put on your downspout, your leaders, and get those black soils away from the foundation, replace them with some sort of a subtle backfill or a clay or some wash gravel or something, just in the interest of keeping it dry. So super easy maintenance that we can all do. And so we know we've got a good roof now. We know we're managing water well off the building. We want to kind of look at our slopes and our landscaping over time. Just with general decomposition, we'll start to see the grades start to rise around our buildings. That might be swailing moisture back into the building, which is something we don't want. So it's important to make sure that we're shedding water and we're moving water around the building and away from it. The foundations you're probably going to see the most of are concrete foundations. Every now and then we'll see a sandstone foundation. Old City Hall, in fact, still retains its original sandstone foundation, which is quite unique. And if you're really unlucky, you'll have a wood foundation. Well, actually, you might be lucky because you might have a log cabin somewhere and it's on grade and has a wood foundation. So when we're inspecting our foundations, always looking for cracks in the concrete. Is there any settlement? Is there any movement? We can have cracks happen later in life. Again, if we're not managing water and we're getting lots of pressure from the freezing in the winter. Sandstone, we're looking for anything that's loose and sloughing, which we'll get into the materials on that in a little bit. Of course, wood rot. We don't want to have any wood rot, and that'll come down to a larger rehabilitation if we're starting to see that. And does your basement smell? Is there anything you can smell down there? Does it smell kind of musty? And then hopefully there's no standing water or moisture. With foundations, that's the integral part of the house. So if you're unsure, if you're uncertain about anything, always, of course, consult a professional engineer for that. Fast forward here. Roofs. So we're managing water. We've got a good foundation. We've got our swales. Now it's time to make sure that our roof is still performing. You know, these are obviously, it's a sacrificial layer that's gonna fail over time. The different types of roofs you're gonna see are the cedar, shingle, and shake. Those are very, very common on heritage buildings. Those are two of my favorite. I mean, they're obviously very expensive up front, but you're gonna get that money back through its lifespan. And then when you're done with it, these are really, really easy to compost. They don't have to go to the landfill, the same as the asphalt shingles. If you're really lucky, you might have a metal roof. Metal roofs can also be restored. There's some great systems to restore metal roofs, and they're not as common as the shingle and shakes, primarily because of supply chain in early Alberta. So with our cedar shingles and shakes, so just to clarify, cedar shingles, they're the sawn, they're the very thin, elegant shingles, and then the cedar shakes are the very heavy split, like they're almost cut with an axe. The big heavy shakes. So we're always looking for any cupping. It might not be the end of the world. It might just be we have to replace a couple of shingles. Sequential cracking. Here's a good roof that somebody's got their money's worth out of this roof down below here. And you're seeing that sequential cracking. So the crack that runs up 3 layers, and that's what we don't want to see. We don't want to see cracks running up multiple layers of the shingle. We want to see the cracks staggered, so it's still shedding water. Metal tiles, of course, you might see some corrosion. You might see water ingress in the attic, and that could be twofold. So maybe your roof has failed and the water's starting to come in the attic, but it could also be condensation. If you recently topped up the insulation in the attic, or if it's not vented well enough, you've done a renovation or added some systems, mechanical systems, and not looked at the venting in the attic, there's a chance that you're going to start getting moisture accumulating in the attic. It's always important if you do want to insulate the attic or do any work up there to find a really qualified contractor to do that kind of work. When you're up in the attic, you can definitely check for smells. And then we also want to look for any damage to the rafters or the eaves. So the rafter, is there any damage coming through the roof deck at the top of the rafter? You might see some staining on the side of it, which isn't the end of the world. But and then the eaves as well. We're notorious for ice damming in Alberta. We're always getting these ice dam cycles that are happening. If they happen enough and they don't dry off, you might start seeing a little bit of damage to the timber at the eaves. So these are all just very simple visual inspections that a person could do. And again, if you're unsure, there's lots of really good roofing inspectors, and you can always hire an engineer for that kind of work as well. And so if you're lucky enough to have a sandstone or brick building, there's definitely a lot of upsides to it. They're extremely durable and long lasting when they're maintained. They shed water, they perform really well to keep the moisture out of the building. And they also show permanence. They show that it's a very robust building, it's something you're proud of. It shows that you plan on being here for a while. Some of the drawbacks is they can be difficult to repair, especially this one up top here. This is a residence in Calgary where all the brick was brought in from England. So it's the brick's no longer available. So if you ever got into a position where you had to replace it, we would have to likely do something that wasn't original to the building. They require really well thought out interventions. We'll get more of that into the masonry and the materials and the people that you might want to perform that. And they can be expensive to maintain. They don't have to be expensive to maintain if we're managing the water on the site and we're keeping the building dry, then the maintenance is very minimal. And then of course, when we damage them, it's irreversible, and then we're trying to source special materials. So really important to keep up the maintenance and well-planned interventions. So with sandstone and brick, moisture, that's our biggest enemy. We've decided it's our biggest enemy. The moisture is managed by the mortar. So that's the bedding mortar that's in between the bricks, and the mortar should always be sacrificial. And that's the beautiful part about a masonry building, is you can always maintain it. Unlike, let's say concrete, once concrete cracks or it spalls, it's really quite difficult to repair. Where your masonry buildings are designed to be repaired. So those repairs typically happen to the mortar if everything's designed well. So the mortar should always be sacrificial, and it should always be softer than the brick or sandstone. Historic mortars are really interesting because the historic mortar was always lime and sand. It was a non-hydrated lime and some sand mixed together. They're extremely soft. They've performed really well. We've seen them all across the world. All the castles in the UK were done this way. But the biggest challenge is we don't have an engineering specification for them. That hasn't been developed yet. So we're always reverting back to cement mortars, which makes sense because we want to make sure that we have the reassurance of an engineer or an ESTM system. But it's interesting, most of the houses that you'll see in Alberta or in the early century are all made from lime and sand. And of course, sandstone and older brick are extremely soft compared to other building materials. They're really, really soft, and we have to be very gentle with them when we're working with them, and especially the brick. So when we put our brick in the oven, we put our clay in the oven and we bake it, it ends up with a fire skin on the outside, and that's that nice smooth appearance you see on the outside. So if that gets damaged, if something happens to that fire skin, you expose the pores of the brick, and the inside of the brick is now on the outside of the building. And it'll be very susceptible to moisture and to carbon and any pollutants or organic material. So when we're washing our building or working in our building, it's really important to maintain that fire skin, which is very, very soft. And what that means is we don't want to pressure wash. Every time you go to a supplier, they're always advertising the latest, greatest amount of pressure they have in these machines. That's really not the best thing for our buildings. So no pressure washing, no sandblasting, or anything that otherwise might damage the sandstone or brick. So even metal scrapers, if you're trying to scrape paint off or scrape off some tar or something. So we do like to use chemicals. There's lots of great chemicals out there that you can use for washing. There's lots of biodegradable, very green natural chemicals that we can use if we want to remove paint or organic matter. And then we like to use low pressure steam, even a garden hose with some hot water will work. And then a very soft bristle brush just to gently clean the building. If you get to the point where you need to bring in a mason, I think it's really important. It's really important that you check their qualifications. Masonry nowadays is just wildly different from masonry 100 years ago. So it's with City Hall being complete, the historic City Hall, there was a number of very qualified masons that worked on that, and they're all living in Calgary now, of course, and it's been a real benefit to Calgary. There's a lot of really qualified masons out there. Should you need one. And again, just another note to ensure that replacement mortar is compatible with your building assembly. Really, really important, because that mortar kind of does the heavy lifting. So if you're like me and you have a wood exterior on your house, you're also very fortunate. We're really turning away from wood these days and going towards a lot of different materials. There's the hardy boards and the plastics and cement boards. But there's a lot of real benefits to using wood on the exterior of the house. And the first one, of course, is that they're green. They're a biodegradable natural product. If they're a wonderfully sustainable product, they don't require a ton of processing or manufacturing, and they're also relatively inexpensive. I mean, not during COVID they weren't, but they are relatively inexpensive compared to some of the specialty sidings that are on the market. And they're super easy to work with. There's lots of people trained in working with wood. It's kind of what we're good at in Alberta, is working with wood. And they don't really need any specialized equipment. There's lots of DIY projects that you can do. And of course, they're very versatile. They're very versatile, and they can be very attractive. At the top here, there's the McCoy Homestead in High River. And this is just one of the old guest houses on the property that's been redone recently using traditional linseed oil paints. The roof, I think, still needs to be done. But if you ever get a chance to get down a High River and visit the McCoy homestead, it's remarkable. It's a remarkable little property. It's a real step back in time. And on the bottom here, we have the Uberheim-Dumanowski residence in Medicine Hat. And this really kind of shows off, I think, what you can do with wood and the versatility of it. Yeah, this is a stunning home in Medicine Hat that really showcases the use of wood. This was all recently repainted. The owner of this house is a strong advocate for preserving heritage and really looks after this house quite well. The drawbacks is they do require maintenance. I don't know if that's a drawback or not. I think maintenance is a good thing. We'll touch on that in a little bit, but I think maintenance is a really good thing. And of course, like everything and like all of us, they can deteriorate over time. So it's our job to sort of keep these in perpetuity and keep those maintenance cycles happening to avoid the deterioration. So when we get into working on our wood exteriors, they definitely require well thought out interventions. One of the reasons that we're not using as much wood as we used to is because of in my opinion, because of the coating systems, because these modern coating systems, they're just not performing the same way that they used to. And obviously we can't get lead paint anymore. I wish we could. It was a great product. Love it or hate it, it was a great product. But they do require well thought out interventions, and those interventions should respect the life cycle stewardship of the building. So the stewardship of the building is making sure that we're not doing something that just creates a liability for someone else down the road. And modern materials, I'm not a fan. Some people might be a fan, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong on this one. But essentially put the caulking and the latex paint away. These are plastic materials. These didn't exist when we first built the building. They were never designed to be a part of that assembly. I don't know why we would use them. The biggest thing is to ensure that our building paper, which is behind our siding, so we have our primary barrier of our siding on the building, and then our secondary barrier of the building paper. And the building paper is what does the work. That's what stops the water from getting in and provides some breathability. And the siding is really just designed to keep the light off and stop the UV from degrading the building paper. These are neat. Linseed oil paints are available again. This is some ancient wisdom that's come back on the market by a company out of Sweden who sell to a company in Kingston, Ontario. Linseed oil paints, the binder is 100% linseed oil. And then what they have in there is there's a natural pigment. So it's a natural earth pigment, which is extremely color fast. And the oil has been boiled to a certain level where it will dry naturally. It will start to skin in about 24 hours and dry naturally. And then over time, that linseed oil will start to oxidize and go off into the atmosphere, and it'll leave behind that pigment. And this is the beautiful part is the maintenance is so easy, because now you just have to put on some more oil over the dried pigment. You don't get into these big campaigns of scraping the paint off and sort of capital projects for repainting. So those are still available. The company is Sage Restoration, sagerestoration.com. I get nothing out of the deal, full disclosure. I just think this is a really good system. This is what I'd like to see more buildings use. And that goes for our putties and our varnishes. If we can really stick to the more traditional materials and traditional oils, we've seen their success and their performance over time. And I think we should lean on that information that we have from the past to keep moving forward. Wood's an interesting one too. If we can, the houses that we're talking about were all built with a high quality wood. It wasn't necessarily an old growth. It wasn't necessarily anything different about the tree, but I think how it was procured. When we procure our lumber nowadays, everything comes into the kiln. We put them in these kilns. Everybody wants kiln dried wood, and the kiln is essentially just a giant oven. It's a microwave. It's very energy intensive. Its job is to get product to market faster. It doesn't mean it's better. It just means that it's going to get the product to market faster. Where all of our buildings that we're used to working on and living in, and all that lumber was air dried, so it's been naturally dried, which creates a very stable lumber. It's tough to get. It's really tough to get air dried timber nowadays. We're hoping to see it come back in the market with some of these green initiatives that are coming to light. If we can naturally dry materials, there's a lower carbon footprint to doing it that way, and you end up with a better product. The big challenge is it's a hefty investment. It's a bit like Scotch whiskey, where you have to let it sit and age for a while before it can go to market. So it's a great example of industry driving change. Industry wanted to get their product to market faster, so they introduced the wood kiln. And what we're starting to see is maybe that's not the best way to procure our timber. And then, of course, we always want to address the root cause of our problems. And why are these problems happening? Why are we repainting? Why is the wood rotting? What's going on with the building? And we'll kind of chat about that with some decision making here. So these are my favorite windows and doors. We're very lucky to have some people from Calgary Sash and Door. When they closed their doors, we were very lucky to have some of their staff come over and teach us some of the finer points of manufacturing windows. So there was always, when we built our windows, they were they're the eyes of the building. They're what connects the building with the streetscape. They're a very, very important part of the building, and definitely shouldn't be overlooked. But historically, windows and doors were always meant to be serviceable. You're always meant to be able to maintain your window. For example, where the glass is bed into the frame, we have the window putty in there, which you're probably all quite familiar with. And that was a sacrificial putty over time that would start to fail. The seal would fail, and we can go back in and we can apply more putty and repaint it. Same with the wood. We had this wonderful high quality timber. We had these great paint systems. We're working on buildings that hasn't been painted in 40 or 50 years, and the windows are still in really good condition. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because they look bad. I think there's plenty of opportunities with old windows to bring them back up into service. Again, efficiency, that's always the big one. Well, they're old single pane windows, they're leaky, they're drafty. We've been doing a lot of work with blower door testing. So we're putting a blower door, basically a big fan inside the building. We're trying to suck as much air through the window as possible, and then putting a water jet on the outside to see what we can do with these. And there's some really good systems. There's some really good systems where we can take an old window, and for not a whole lot of money or a lot of difference between the cost of a new window, give you some really good performance. A lot of that performance comes from fitting a storm window on, like you see on this building up here. It's got this beautiful new storm window, and then the divided lights in behind. You can see the original sash in there. So those are original double hung windows in behind with a nice tightly fitted storm. And these operate on a hopper, so these will actually open up and ventilate. You don't have to take them off in the summer months, which I know is kind of a pain in the building. Typically, they'd be made from wood or metal. Lots of the time, they're made from wood. Every now and then, we see metal windows. Metal windows are certainly a challenge because they're really difficult to upkeep, and they're not as don't offer the same performance perhaps that wood does. You typically see metal windows in your Department of Defense buildings and bigger government buildings. So again, we mentioned the efficiency can be managed in a number of ways, and again, the right intervention can keep windows in service for years. Down here, you just see a very simple. Some windows are working on this. A small patch needed to be done. There's a little bit of deterioration on one of the rails. Same thing at the top, but we've managed to keep all these mountain bars intact, pulled the glass, pulled the putty. Essentially what we're doing with our windows is if we can do a bit of a capital project and get you back into the linseed oil system and the traditional putties, then we can get into these wonderful maintenance cycles and facilitate the maintenance. We'll talk a little bit more about maintenance because I'm a big fan of maintenance. So of course, again, to tie into that, material use is of the utmost importance, and that's why I always kind of fall back to the folks at Sage Restoration for most of our materials, because they are doing a deep dive into those traditional materials. So you've done some work in your house. Maybe now you've done as far as you can go, and maybe now you need to get some professional advice or you need to hire a contractor. I'd stay away from the orange aprons if you can. They're certainly great for some things, but definitely not for older buildings. So advice is available. Architects, engineers, architectural technologists, building inspectors. The province has a great group of heritage conservation advisors. And I think even if your house isn't a provincial historic resource, but it's listed, they're still happy to come in and offer advice. And they've got lots of case studies. They've got lots of people they can put you in contact with. And the same goes for the City of Calgary Heritage Planners. There are some dedicated heritage planners who can certainly point you in the right directions. And then of course we have our lots of great grassroots community organizations, and there are a couple of really good contractors in town. Spending time with a professional consultant will always improve your project understanding. And the more you understand, the more you can control the cost in the project. So sometimes it requires spending a little bit upfront. And again, this will tie into our chat about planning. But the more time you spend up front, the more you're going to develop the plan and develop the cost certainties. It doesn't always have to be the way you do it, but just a note. And then I always ask, whenever I have a sub-trade or if I'm hiring somebody to come do some work for us, I always ask them for a project understanding. What do you understand about my project? And because it's my home, it's my project, my building. What do you understand about it? Why should I hire you? Why are you the best one for it? And then of course a fee proposal, and then as always, references are always good to check. This is a good note. Poorly planned interventions. A poorly planned intervention will be cheaper up front. It'll definitely be cheaper up front, but it can become a very expensive capital project if you're not careful. Case in point, a friend of mine owns a beautiful little heritage home just off 17th Ave downtown. And he called me up because the lath and plaster in his bathroom was failing. It was all falling off. And I said, well, that's weird. Like, the house is 100 years old. It's the original lath and plaster. What happened? He says, well, I don't have a fan in there. I said, well, it's never had a fan. So what did you, is there something you did? Did you change something in the house? And he goes, no, I didn't do anything. I mean, he goes, I repainted it a couple years ago, but that was it. So what did you paint it with? He said, well, I painted it with elastomeric paint. And for those who aren't familiar, elastomeric paint is what it sounds like. It's a giant latex glove that you slide over top of your house, and it completely seals off the exterior of the building. So taking this wonderful permeable wall assembly that air is kind of flowing back and forth through the wall, and all of a sudden you've stopped it at the exterior of the building. So all that hot air from the bathroom is now coming into the wall cavity, and it can't get out, and it's trapping in the wall. And as a result, the lath and plaster starts to fail. There's a bunch of moisture that can't get out, and you're starting to experience mold and all sorts of issues. So there's a great sort of case study where had we maybe used a different material on the exterior of the building, or planned out our intervention a little bit, even just by installing a fan or some air makeup, knowing that we've now sealed off the exterior of the building, he could have avoided this really expensive capital project of ripping apart his bathroom and doing a bunch of remediation. If you're doing a project, you can do lump sum construction management or time and materials. So lump sum is, I will do the job for X number of dollars, and here's the scope, and we'll get into that sort of agreement. There's also construction management, where you can pay a fee for someone to come in and help you manage the project. And my favorite is always just time and materials, where you pay for the time that you use. And the materials that you use, this one has the least amount of cost certainty, of course. Lump sums, where we need to do that investigation first. We need to have that project understanding before we can get in with a fixed price. And then this one's a bit shocking, but not really. I would always carry contingency funding. We always recommend to carry about 20% contingency funding, because the buildings they're full of surprises. You never know what you're going to get into. Hopefully it's all original and there's not some weird renovation that's been done over the years, or numerous people did work on the building. But you carry a little bit of contingency just in case, just because you never know. So the standards and guidelines, what they teach us is that we always want to understand their building, make a plan, and then intervene. So we always refer to the heritage value and the character defining elements. What makes our home unique? Is it the windows? Is it the form and massing? Is it the type of exterior on it? What defines that as a heritage building? I mean, on top of the fact that it's 100 years old. So we want to refer back to those elements and try and preserve those elements as best we can. And then, of course, always investigate. And if you can, please document the condition, any changes that you make. It's great when you're working in a house and you find an old set of blueprints or an old photo album. The McDougall Church out just west of Cochrane there, we were very fortunate after the fire to find a full set of blueprints, condition assessment, specifications and a photographic assessment. And without that information, we wouldn't have been able to restore that building because there would have been too much conjecture. So information is key, and documenting it. And even if it's just lots and lots of photographs of the work that you're doing and putting them in a folder in a drive somewhere, is wildly helpful. And that ties into our life cycle stewardship of the building, because eventually we are going to pass this building on to someone else. This one doesn't really apply if it's a home, to maintain or select an appropriate and sustainable use for a building. I think most of the buildings we're talking about are primary residences. But if anyone gets a chance, this is a really neat building. This is just the interior of the St. Mary's University water tower. So the president, when he took over as president, took over a very derelict water tower, and it's a 70-foot tall building that only has about a 350 square foot footprint at the base. So what do you do with a building that's only 350 square feet? So he actually had the idea to turn it into a creative teaching space and a art gallery, which it's a very appropriate use for the space, in my opinion, because we didn't really have to make any changes. It just needed a really good clean and a new floor put in. We restored the water pumps, and it's also a very sustainable use for the building because it can generate revenue. We've now got students who are using the space, and we have there's different art functions. So if anyone gets a chance to go and support the St. Mary's University team, or even just to check out that project, it's a really neat project. Of course, identify what are the requirements that we need and what sort of treatments. This will tie into the standards and guidelines where we want to be doing. We always want a minimal intervention. We want to be doing as little as possible with maximum benefit. We want to be doing things that are reversible. We want to make sure that any changes we make are subordinate to the original fabric, but discernible upon close inspection. And then, of course, that ties into reviewing the standards and following the guidelines. Intervene. So you're ready to intervene, ready to undertake the project work and carry out your scheduled maintenance. I think this is the most important part is maintenance. We've as a society, we've sort of developed this arrogance that we don't need to maintain anything anymore. And if it's maintenance free, that it's somehow better when it's really just disposable. And when we do maintenance, this ties into our local movements. This ties into buying local, because now you're supporting a local economy of people coming out and working on your building. We're not bringing in materials and processed materials from across borders and sort of giving our hard-earned dollars away. We're keeping it in the local economy. So I think carrying out that scheduled maintenance is really, really important, and that's something that we've moved away from, but we can certainly come back to. That was it. It's a bit strange speaking into a screen. I really hope that we can all meet in person again soon. We are looking to have some hands-on courses. We're just starting to develop some hands-on courses, which will do a deeper dive into historic masonry, window servicing, window maintenance, some glazing, puttying, again, the traditional paints. We've got some heritage masons who are going to offer some courses on repointing and some basic stonework and cleaning. So please look forward to those coming out. And if you have any comments or ideas of something that you'd like to host, or if there's something that's been bothering you that you think would be beneficial, please reach out and let me know. And lastly, I know we have a Q&A now, I believe. If we don't answer all your questions today, or maybe there's no questions, if you have a question down the road, always reach out. Advice is always free. At the end of the day, we just want to see these projects be successful. So please reach out to us if you have any questions or anything that we can help you with.
Thank you so much, Dave, for the wonderful presentation and also sharing your knowledge with us. Last time I learned anything about houses was when we were hit by hailstorm last year. And that's when I started picking a few things about how to fix a house. But no, that's nowhere close to the knowledge that you have. So thank you so much. And we do have a couple of questions
Sure.
in the chat. We have Jackie, who's asked, what in your view is the main mistake owners of heritage properties make?
The main mistake, water management is a big one. I know we really talked about water management. That's a really big one, is to just really stay on top of that water management. It's amazing how fast it'll take over. And I think the overuse of modern materials, we need to be very sympathetic to those materials that we're using. And a lot of that comes down to the types of paint. I find that the paint systems, modern paint systems don't really work as well as we'd like them to in a lot of cases. And it's not to say every modern paint is a bad paint, but there are a lot of bad ones out there as well. Yeah, those are probably the big two. And then always remember maintenance. You know, they do require maintenance, and that's part of the package, and that's part of the beauty of owning one of these buildings. So
Awesome, thank you. The next one, Sherry asks, what is the current condition and use forecast for Calgary Courthouse number 2?
Oh, I have that's a good question for the city. Courthouse number 2. I think that's the old one downtown. I heard rumors that there was something coming up. I think there's a few articles in the Herald that they were planning to do something with it to restore it. But yeah, boy, I don't know. I just think that's actually owned by Alberta Infrastructure, I believe. So they would be the people to ask. But I hope it gets restored. And it's a beautiful building. It would be lovely to see that one restored.
Awesome. Next one from Betty, is the 1950s home considered heritage?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we've done a really good job. The city and the province have done a really good job of preserving a lot of our early 1900 buildings. Yeah, there's been a huge push to preserve these buildings, and I think we're getting close to having most of them now preserved. So the next thing we have to look at is, she's absolutely right, is we got to look at the next generation of building, and that is typically your 1950s post-war, your 1960s mid-century modern. It'd be hard to designate something that was built in the last 30 years because they're just, in my opinion, the houses aren't as nice as they were. But absolutely, yeah. There's a couple. The Bloom residence just became a designated building, and that was a building that was built in the 1960s. It's a very unique building down in Shaughnessy. I think you could probably look it up in the City of Calgary Heritage Inventory. It's BLUM, the Bloom residence.
Nice. Next one from Marilyn. Have you also used linseed oil putty as a wood filler before, and would you recommend using it?
Yes, absolutely. I wish I could have done a deeper dive into some of the methods and materials. I really want to host some more workshops. So it's a very good question, Marilyn. Traditionally, what was always specified on projects was to use epoxy fillers. And so when there was cracks in the wood or things were splitting or deteriorating, it was very common practice to pack them full of epoxy, which is great, but it doesn't respect the life cycle stewardship, because in 5 to 7 years, they start to crack and they start to pop. And what you end up with is somebody has to go back in and scrape all that hard epoxy out, and the wood's rotted around it. And it's a horrible system. Where linseed putty is, it's linseed oil and chalk. And it's a wonderful filler that's very versatile, very easy to use. You can pack it into joints and you can fill small holes with it. And the beautiful part about it is, if it does start to fail or crack in that 5 to 7 years or 10 years, whatever it is, it's really, really easy to repair. You just take some more putty and you apply more putty to that crack and kind of fill it back in again, and then put some paint on it, and you can paint it right away. And that's something I'd love to go over more in a workshop. If anybody has any questions, if anybody has a project, please feel free to reach out to us, or stop by the shop and we can show you some of these techniques anytime. There really needs to be hands-on, and you need to kind of touch and feel it and work with the material. But that's a great question.
And that's a great offer as well. The next one from Betty. So what paint should I use for my 1950s era house made of stucco and wood?
I always refer back to the linseed oil paints. There's a bit of preparation that has to happen to the surface, but they're compatible with almost any substrate, like any type of existing paint. I love using them personally, just because of their ease of maintenance. Stucco is a good one. Stucco, there's two companies. There's a company called Keim, which is KEIM, and another company called Beek, which is BEECK, and those are mineral paints. So these are mineral oil with a solid mineral coating, and what it's designed to do is to sort of impregnate into the stucco assembly and not form the plastic skin on top. And then it's also color fast pigment. using those natural pigments again, and allows the building to breathe. It doesn't allow moisture to back up behind it. So the beak, there's a beak Reno sill, which is really good, and there's also the Kime paints. I think Kime's manufactured in Canada, I believe.
Great. Another one from Jackie. Do you have a heritage building?
Kind of. I've got a 1962 slab on grade, mid-century modern. It's a really funky house. So there's no basement. It's horribly inefficient, which I'm kind of slowly picking away at. But yeah, it's sort of this low slung 212 pitch roof with the tongue and groove cedar wood deck, and then of course it's got the exposed wood beams running through it, and the mass fireplace in the middle. It's so I think for all intents and purposes it should be a heritage home. It's clad in vinyl siding and all sorts of poorly planned interventions, which if I ever get time I'd like to bring it back to what it was, because we do have the original drawings for the house. So I don't live in a heritage building, but it's kind of a heritage building. Hopefully one day it's a heritage building. Yeah.
For sure. That's all the code. We've got another one that's just come in. Can we get your contact information? Are you able to share your business card? I'm assuming that's what Betty's asking for.
Yeah, I don't know what the best way to communicate that is, but
maybe what we can do is you can pass that over to us, and then once we send up a follow-up email, we can add that in there. Yeah,
please do. We love helping people see their projects be successful. And it doesn't have to be us doing the work. We just want to see a successful project. And if anybody needs any advice or wants to come by the shop's always open to help you out with any tips or tricks or anything you might need. So absolutely, yeah, we would always happy to help.
I think I'd probably come by the shop for sure.
You should.
I would love to learn a few extra tricks and tips for sure. Yeah, no, that's a great offer. That's another question that's just, it's actually just a comment from Betty. She said, thank you for all your help. Do we have any more questions from any of our audiences? We can wait a few seconds just in case anyone is typing at the moment. If you miss this chance, this will only come next year now. So please ask away. Oh, there we go. We've got one from Ashley. Is it possible to lower the floors in a basement? 110-year-old house. Basement seems to be river rock.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of engineers in town. I think it's probably best if you grab my contact information from the library, which we can pass around. I could put you in touch. There's a couple of really good engineers in Calgary who'd be proficient in putting a design together for that. It's a lot of labor because you got to bring the buckets of rock out. But yeah, it's been done a lot. It's a great way to create some more usable space in a heritage home to try and get some taller ceilings down there. So yeah, it could definitely be done.
Great. Another one from Jackie. What was the biggest challenge in restoring the McDougall Church?
Oh, the McDougall Church. I would say the biggest opportunity, there's definitely some design challenges. We're working off a set of drawings that were put together by the Alberta government and the University of Calgary in 1985. So trying to source all the different materials and trying to put all those assemblies back together just the way it was in the drawings. Trying to find different types of hardware. A lot of the hardware was homemade. The big beams that run through the church, there's all sorts of different beams and trusses, and they were all hand planed. The logs were cut with an axe. So there's a lot of labor that went into it, as a labor of love. The biggest opportunity was to work with the neighboring Stoney Nakoda. We were really fortunate to have a dedicated group of elders who got involved in the project, and they were very, very welcoming. And they shared a lot of stories and a lot of teachings with us, and challenged a lot of my beliefs. They challenged my beliefs to their very core, and it was an opportunity. I mean, that building's always been a gathering place, good or bad. There's been a lot of history, good and bad, but it's always been a gathering place, and that's is what it turned into during the restoration. It was a gathering place for the society that owns it and my company and the elders to all work together again. And it was a wonderful relationship. So biggest challenge was the technical components of trying to put all the pieces back together and source material. And the biggest opportunity was really working with that group of elders. We were really honored and really quite fortunate. So
That sounds like an exciting experience. We've got one question from Kathleen. I live in a 1913 house with some plaster damage to a wall. How can I find someone who's qualified to repair it?
With a lath and plaster wall with some damage to it. Oh man, every time I find somebody who's competent in lath and plaster, they just disappear. There's so few of them, and they're all they're definitely getting a bit older. Yeah, there's a few different recognized methods. If it's a provincial historic resource, I'd probably reach out to the province. They have a contact list of people who are proficient in that, and they have the repair methods, sort of approved repair methods. That's a really good question. Yeah, lath and plaster. We'd have to investigate the cause of the damages, understand why the damages are occurring, for one, and mitigate that first, so it doesn't keep happening. And then from there, yeah, it would really be getting you in touch with the right person, and then also examine the assembly and understand why it's failing and how far is the failure gone. Lath and plaster is interesting because it's not really a character defining element of a home. It is an original material, it's original fabric, but it's very labor intensive to reproduce and doesn't really offer a huge benefit to the owner once you've done that work, because it just looks like a wall when you're finished. So that's a case where you could potentially look at just using drywall as well. Drywall would be a sympathetic material, subordinate to the original fabric and discernible upon close inspection. So yeah, there's a couple different options, I guess, without getting too philosophical about it. Yeah, definitely examine why it's happening, what kind of repair we could do, which is usually finding the right person for that. And in lieu of lath and plaster, maybe looking at using a different material that's more readily available.
Just a comment from Kathleen, just following up from that question. The cause has been fixed. Now I just want it fixed so I can paint it.
Oh. If she reaches out to me, I can, if it's all fixed and ready to go, I do have a fellow who does clay plastering and lime plastering in Calgary. He's kind of taking his business off into Whistler, but he's one fellow that I know that I can maybe put you in touch with. So feel free to shoot me an email. I'll put you in touch with the fellow that I know, and if he doesn't know, then perhaps he could point you in the right direction better than I could.
Great. Next one is from my colleague Catherine. Dirt basement smelling a little weird after it rains, but not smelling weird all the time. Normal or concerning?
It'd be good to do a walk around the house. It'd be good to look at how we're managing the water on the site. Yeah, it sounds like something's getting in. There's some humidity. I would start at the roof, look at our roof, our downspouts, make sure water's pushing away, the eaves are clear. And then our grades are pushing away. It's amazing how much we always overlook the eaves troughs. They're the unsung hero of a heritage building, and along with the grading. So if you could have a good look around at how the water is being managed on the site. Sometimes you can get out and just sort of visually look and see where things are going, or walk around in the rain and see if it's coming in somewhere. Yeah, and again, if you get stuck, that's a great time to. You can always give us a call. We're happy to come out and have a look and offer an opinion. And then maybe if we can't figure it out, then we could certainly escalate it. But if you're not smelling anything moldy and it's drying, heritage buildings are notorious for leaking. They always leak a little bit, and we can get away with it in Alberta because it's such a dry climate. We can accept that things are going to get a little bit wet and they're going to dry out because we have so much sunshine and so much wind. Or in BC, you couldn't do the same thing because it's too humid and the rain just comes for days and days and days. It doesn't dry out. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question or not. But.
No, you did. Thank you for that. We have another one from Sherry. Was lime mortar in 1909 manufactured on site, or were components brought in from other localities?
N1909. I'm not familiar with the N1909, but lime mortar. Most of our lime in southern Alberta came from Exshaw, Cochrane Exshaw from the limestone bluffs there. Yeah, so if we're talking about a historic mortar, that would have come from Exshaw, and most of it still comes from Exshaw, and then a local sand, the local sharp sand. But yeah, most of the mortars were made locally, is what we've gathered from past projects. Most modern mortars do come pre-bagged with the ASTM specification on them.
No, that's great. Any more questions from our audience? Don't see anything in the Q&A or the chat. It looks like we are finishing up a little early, which is completely fine, as we've gathered a lot of information from you, Dave. Thank you so much for all that knowledge that you have shared with us today. I'd like to let our audience know that you can sign up or visit calgarylibrary.ca to sign up for future or upcoming programs with Historic Calgary Week and other programs that are offered by the library as well. I'll quickly pass it over to Kathleen to finish us off for the evening.
Well, thank you, Hamza, for keeping us on track tonight. Don't know how you guys do it, but it has made it so easy for all of us. So thank you, Dave, so much. I have a feeling that your phone might be a little bit busy in the next while with people having suddenly little questions to ask of you. So, and I know certainly you might be getting a call from me about something along the line as well. So it was very interesting tonight. And we do hope all of you will find time this week to take in further Historic Calgary Week programs. And you can check out our website. Here it is at chinookhistory.ca for information regarding both our virtual and in-person programs.